Hey guys, Roman and Reaper here. So, as you guys know, the DCEU is due to be reset in a few weeks' time with The Flash. But before we can move forward to the bright future DC has in store under the guidance of James Gunn, we got to take a look back because, well, the last decade has been, well, it's been quite a turbulent road, shall we say, and the franchise is not exactly ending on a bang either because, well, right before the Flash resets everything, we've got the humiliating box office failure that is Shazam Fury of the Gods. Although I actually kind of liked the film, didn't deserve to do as badly as it did. Consider this like a post-mortem for the DCEU, if you will. This is a broad look at why the DCEU as a franchise failed to franchise, and I have multiple different reasons in mind as to why, which I will take you through now, starting with reason number one. Fuck Marvel! Okay, so if we're gonna look at why the DCEU failed, we gotta look at why their closest competition succeeded. Of course, you know, this is not going to be a blind MCU Infinity Saga nostalgia goggles rant, but it's worth noting why the MCU at its prime was such a success. You know, they took their time and built up the characters, you know, giving them their own solo films before the big team-up events. Like, can you imagine if the MCU had gone from Iron Man straight into Captain America Civil War and just essentially rush in introducing Captain America and rushed in setting up the Avengers? No, you couldn't. Because the MCU did such a good job of setting up these characters over a period of time. Like, they allowed individual filmmakers to build up the characters, you know, in their way, but still believably feel like they're part of an interconnected universe. Like, no such luck with DC, because obviously by the time they started their universe, you know, the first Avengers film had come out, you know, made $1 billion at the box office, you know, it was a huge hit and completely changed the game. And of course, Man of Steel was in post-production at that point. They saw that success and were like, hey, why don't we just do that? And essentially they just decided to rush ass backwards into building a cinematic universe, you know, to make a bit of that Marvel money without understanding why Marvel made it work in the first place. Oh, and it doesn't help that they had completely conflicting ideas over how to go about it.
He's Zack Snyder, you know. Hey, Watchmen, it's really cool.
So you remember how in my previous point I mentioned how Marvel let individual filmmakers build and develop the characters, you know, before ultimately putting them into the big team up films. Like we had Jon Favreau with Iron Man, Joe Johnston directed Captain America before the Russos developed the character in a big way, and like Kenneth Branagh directed Thor before Taika Waititi wonderfully revitalized the character, and then just made him a complete joke. And most recently, James Gunn just finished his Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. So the point is, these filmmakers were, you know, left to their own devices. You know, they were allowed to do their own thing and build the characters their way, but it still fit in with the larger universe. What Warner Brothers did was their big genius idea was to bet their entire cinematic universe gamble on the hands of one man, and that one man, Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder.
I say what you will about Snyder's filmography, but this is obviously the thing that did them in the long run, yeah. Entrusting the cinematic universe in the hands of one man is a big gamble, and it's one that ultimately didn't pay off, which I will talk about later. But it also means that the universe as a whole has no individual personality that can link up later on down the line in a natural way, like jigsaw pieces. The problem here is that Snyder and Warner's absolutely clashed, did not see eye to eye on how they wanted this universe to go. Warner's had a decade-long plan of this big, interconnected, expansive universe, whereas Zack Snyder essentially just had a big Justice League arc, basically. Can you see where I'm going with this? As I said, there is a big gamble, and it's one that would absolutely doom this universe if it didn't pay off, which it didn't.
12%.
12%?
And herein lies the problem of Warner's entrusting their entire cinematic universe in Snyder's hands. Because, if things, shouldn't pan out, they have no backup plan and things would just fall apart. And boy, did they hit a brick wall with the critical disappointment and big financial underperformance that was Batman v Superman.
Why did you say that name?
Jesus, the way this thing was hyped up, the hype was there. This should have been a $1 billion event, but the film ended up not being very good, and well, it couldn't even crack 900 million. Oh, irrelevant trivia, but the Batman on its own made more profit than Batman v Superman and Man of Steel combined. Just a side note. So yeah, ultimately, they hit this critical and commercial brick wall, and well, they had no backup plan. So ultimately, this left the franchise just kind of meander, incredibly directionless. So their entire big gamble was cut off at the knees, within an instant. It is remarkable. I don't think I've seen this big a cinematic universe fumbling outside of the Dark Universe. Nothing will top that. A complete unmitigated disaster. But, for all the lack of plan Warner's had in the aftermath of Batman v Superman, later on they kind of tried to have one. Well, at least someone did anyway.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard.
So picture this. It's 2007, you're Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You've just been cast as Black Adam in a project. Ultimately, nothing materialized until 15 years later, where you get your big solo project where, you get the headline as the character you've been passionate about playing for over a decade. The project ultimately bombs financially, but that's irrelevant. What is relevant, though, is that in the lead up to Black Adam's release, The Rock was real adamant about, reshaping the DCEU in his image, changing the hierarchy of power.
As the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
And, see, thing is, right, The Rock wanted to headline this universe as Black Adam, along with Henry Cavill as Superman, Not because, Black Adam and Superman have a ton of history in the comics, and not even because Black Adam's that iconic of a character in the first place, but because The Rock gets to be at the center of a big cinematic comic book universe where he fights Superman. for the sake of his image, we know he'd win anyway. 'Cause, it's in his contract that he can't lose a fight. And see, the thing is, right? Say what you will about David F. Sandberg's Shazam films, but the guy loves the character enough. He at least has enough of an understanding of the comics. That he actually wants to tie Shazam into Black Adam. With the post-credit scene of Fury of the Gods, having Shazam be recruited into the Justice Society, potentially teasing a fight with Black Adam. Just like in the comic books. But no, The Rock is too good for the Shazam franchise, apparently. Why would I, want to fight, some goofy superhero who's just a kid, when we can fight Superman? Like, nothing materialized, obviously, because Black Adam bombed. But yeah, let this be a lesson. Don't get some star power to headline a big project. They will, see themselves as too big for this. And by the way, this isn't even the most misjudged piece of casting in the whole DCEU. It gets worse, trust me. So, the most misguided casting decisions in the DCU come from the early days, from the Snyderverse, with some just real gems that just make you go, why? Like, you've got Jesse Eisenberg giving the most irritating screen performance of 2016 as Lex Zuckerberg. Sorry, Lex Luthor. Seriously, like the performance he has given, he just showed how perfect he was for the Riddler. And probably what happened was that he was cast as Riddler, and then last minute they changed the character. And also doesn't help, the direction was probably, hey Jesse, remember your really good performance as Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network? Yeah, do that, but dial all the way up to 11. Also misguided casting decisions, we have Ray Fisher as Cyborg. Nothing against his performance or anything. He was fine. In fact, he was the heart of the Snyder Cut. The problem here is more so much to do with the fact that, well, since the whole thing, he has just been picking fights with whatever person of power at Warner Bros. He feels like it, including James Gunn. We also have Jared Leto as Joker. Just the less we say about that one, the better.
Both.
Oh, and we also have possibly the biggest gem of a casting decision of all.
Dostoevsky.
Ezra goddamn Miller. Oh boy, I've wanted to talk about this for a while. But Jesus, what an absolute PR nightmare Ezra ended up being for Warner Bros. So, for those not in the know, in 2020, a video surfaced of Ezra Miller choking a woman in a bar in Iceland. Nothing much became of that. A bit of discussion was had, obviously, online, as you'd expect. Until 2022, when twice within the span of a month, Ezra Miller was arrested for assaulting women in Hawaii.
Is it always girls?
What? Yeah, I don't know.
Because you've got to say that's pretty impressive.
And then the situation just built and built with all kinds of crazy allegations of things Ezra may or may not have done, such as grooming 12-year-olds, housing people in a barn on Vermont with guns and weed. Like, the situation was literally just nuts. Like, and obviously Ezra is getting the help that they so seriously need. But yeah, but yeah, with all of this that went down, you sort of have to question: does Ezra have a history of this kind of just generally disturbed behavior? And if so, do you think Warner's maybe should have, I don't know, done a more thorough background check? Obviously, you can't know these things for sure. Like, just look at everything that's happened with Jonathan Majors recently. Like, but it would certainly help in the long run. It was interesting that I brought up Ezra Miller in my last point there because, well, Warner's is really trying to do a number on building hype for The Flash. There's been getting tons of positive word of mouth, and the general impression of the pre-release marketing is that this is the greatest superhero movie ever made, or one of them anyway. Like they're obviously trying to make this their No Way Home. Which is interesting because, this is obviously positioned to end the DCU, hopefully on a bang with, a real hope, a positive note. Which is interesting because every time there was, like, a hint of hope for the DCU, they would completely squander it. So let's look at every silver lining in the DCU. So let's look Wonder Woman. Yeah, it was very well received. Audiences liked it. Did very well at the box office and turned a healthy profit. Yeah. It was, an early sign of hope that maybe things actually weren't so bad, and of those previous films, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, those were just stumbles and that things would get back on track. Its immediate follow-up was Justice League, which we all know how that went.
Kal-El, no!
And ultimately, the sequel was received way worse, and ultimately bombed because it was released in the middle of a global pandemic and sent straight to streaming at the same day it was in cinemas. Okay, I brought up Suicide Squad there. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn was a fan favorite, right? People like Margot Robbie's portrayal, right? Well, Harley Quinn got her own solo film, which underperformed and ultimately had its legs cut short by said global pandemic, and ultimately appeared in a supporting role in James Gunn's Suicide Squad film, which was a huge bomb at the box office, partially because it went straight to streaming on the same day it was in cinemas, despite the fact it was a wonderful film and it was tainted by its predecessor. Hey, the Suicide Squad, ironically, was one of those bright notes. It was a wonderful film, really well received by the critics and the audience, and it even spawned its own spin-off show about one of the fan favorite characters, Peacemaker, which itself was really well received and was one of the biggest shows in the world upon its release. Again, the film was tainted by its predecessor being so shit, and ultimately nobody went to see it, and in fact, the people who did watched it on HBO Max, and I lost a whole ton of money. But hey, James Gunn is now in charge of DC, so again, another bright spot. And last but not least, in terms of every silver lining has a cloud, Shazam. The first film was well received, audiences liked it, turned a tidy little profit, was a modest little success for them. The sequel, however, arrived into the marketplace dead on arrival, just zero hype, zero awareness, just much worse reviews than the first, and ultimately was a humiliating box office disaster, one of the biggest box office bombs of any comic book movie, and was one of the recent flops that led to the recent discussion of online of is superhero fatigue real? But ultimately, despite all of these feelings, I do believe things can turn around for DC, and here is why. So ultimately, the franchise is set to be rebooted with the new DCU on the horizon, not the DCEU, run by James Gunn and Peter Safran. And I think this is where DC can be a serious rival to Marvel. You know, obviously the general feeling around the MCU is, you know, generally quite tepid and middling, with, you know, most audiences, you know, obviously noticing a decline in quality from, you know, the MCU at its peak in the Infinity Saga to now right in the middle of the multiverse saga. But I think this is where DC can absolutely pack a punch. Like, they have a really solid plan, a 10-year plan for their new universe. So they're obviously learning from their mistakes. And from what's been announced so far, all of this I'm actually really excited for. Like, we are getting our first proper Superman film in well over a decade. And it looks like it's not only going to be a traditional Superman, but it's a Superman inspired by Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman run. We also have a Swamp Thing film being written and directed by James Mangold, which I'm really excited for. Like, you know, with the potential of this being a proper R-rated horror film. Like, the point is, there's more than likely going to be plenty of diversity in tones, styles, genres. Like, this is where the new DC can thrive on the big screen. Yeah. And, you know, with everyone, you know, describing possible feelings of Marvel burnout, Marvel fatigue, like, now would be the perfect time, if the new universe ends up being good, where everyone can jump over to DC. But like, whoever thought that it would be coming to this? Like, remember when the DCEU, you know, ultimately hit a brick wall and became a huge laughingstock, you know, while the MCU was, you know, really growing into its peak, you know, and they were this, like, you know, juggernaut that just couldn't be stopped. Like, it's funny how times change, like. But yeah, I have full faith in Gunn and Safran, and I really hope they deliver. And I hope we can leave this mess behind us. So yeah, that's my thoughts on why the DCEU failed. Let me know down in the comments your take on why it failed, and let me know, are you excited for the future? And what projects that Gunn has lined up are you excited for most? Let me know all that down in the comments. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new. And don't forget to turn on post notifications so you don't miss an upload.